Today, we get to talk about how I survived physical therapy school. And this is a topic that I think is relevant because I'm aware that a lot of my audience online is either physical therapists or PT students or people that want to go to PT school one day. So I thought, what better subject to cover than the age old question of how do I get through PT school? I think I get this question a lot. Recently, I had an old family friend of mine. It's actually a girl I used to nanny. She came by the clinic and she did some observation hours. And after her last day, she was like, I do have one more question. Is it true what people say that I won't have any free time once I go to PT school and my life is going to be absolute hell? And I was like, no, girl, it's not. It wasn't that way for me. And I don't think it has to be that way for anybody that goes through it, depending on who you are. But I think I can speak on my experience and offer a little bit of how to along the way. I think there's such a fear tactic that goes on in the grad school world, specifically with physical therapy school. You hear from previous students and from the professors at the school and just out in the community, people being like, oh, just wait till you get in. Like, it's going to be the hardest days of your life and you won't have time to work a job and you'll never see your family or friends. And that just isn't the case. And I mean, it could be the case for some people. It depends on how intense you are. But if you're anything like me and you're proficient at planning for the future and taking things day by day and recognizing when it's crunch time and when it's time to give yourself a little reprieve, then you'll be absolutely fine. So, in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about my personal physical therapy school experience and then maybe what I would tell my past self if anything would change or if I could change anything. To start, I think we need to identify that there are different types of people. I recently took an Enneagram test. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I love those personality tests. I think it's so cool that we know enough about human psychology to be able to piece people out into like 9 different categories and say, yeah, you're pretty much one of these. Like, you're not that special. Anyways, I am a 8 wing 7 or a 7 wing 8. I can't remember. But point of this is there are a lot of different combinations of personalities and types of people that find their way to the first year of physical therapy school and that first day in class. There are a lot of different methods to the madness. Some classmates of mine were very high strung and very stressed out. And some people would show up and like not even know that we had a test that day. And then there's a lot of people in between. And I think for the majority of physical therapists, we fall somewhere in between. We are hardworking, we have a vision, we are motivated to get there, and we're a little bit nervous about what that's going to look like. If you're in the United States, physical therapy programs at this point are pretty much all 3 years of graduate school to get your doctorate, following the prerequisite 4 years of an undergraduate bachelor's degree. And most people, for the most part, are going into PT school kind of right out of college. And so you are already on that train of we know how to study, we know how to take tests. You've already got that steam, okay? I I had a year off where I worked as a patient services coordinator for a PT clinic and did like insurance verification and worked the front desk. And then I also took some time and traveled. I was traversing around Europe like 1 week before PT school started. So, uh, looking back, no regrets. Thankful that I had the work experience and the travel experience prior to starting PT school. But some people go straight into it from undergrad, and I think that's kind of nice because you already have that fire underneath your ass, and you're like, well, we're just going to keep grinding for the next 3 years, and you're probably sick of school by the end of it. But I think that could be a kind of nice place to be. One thing that I think really helped me in the beginning was my living situation. It's kind of random, but I was living in the basement of my sister-in-law's parents' house. I'm really close with my sister-in-law. I've known her since I was 13 years old. And so therefore also pretty close with her parents. And when they found out that I was going to the University of North Georgia up in Dahlonega, they're like, "Hey, we live 10 minutes from campus. Instead of commuting from your parents' house an hour every day, do you want to live in our basement?" And I was like, "Heck yeah." You guys, this house was like golf course, gated community. I had the whole first floor to myself. That's like 2 bedrooms, a big den area. I was living large. But the point is, being close to campus was pretty crucial. And I understand everyone's life situation will differ. And if you really want to save money and you can only live at home and commute, that's totally fine too. But being close to campus was really nice for me, just in terms of being able to get to know people and also not having the stress of a drive. But looking back, if I had the drive, because about halfway through PT school, I had to move out, I really capitalized on that time in the car by listening to podcasts. And these are like study podcasts, anything that I was interested in the PT field. So making the best use of your time in that way, I think is necessary and good. The first year of school is all about covering the basics. Most likely, you will take anatomy and physiology and you will have a cadaver lab and it will be wild. I my cohort, we had 4 students per body and it was intense. I mean, that in-person lab is grueling. It smells kind of. It's unlike anything that you've ever done before, but it's also kinda like your main thing. So you know that this is the main thing I have to focus on. I need to know my shit for anatomy. Like, hands down, without a doubt, this is important. Every school is gonna be structured a bit differently, but I think we took, I don't know, 4 or 5 classes at a time, and that always felt manageable. But it felt manageable to me because I was a planner. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some like color coded 7 different colors of highlighter, perfect planner every single year. I get the newest version. No, not really. I would just like go to Walmart, pick out the planner that I liked, find one good pen that I liked, and strategically prioritize each week. Like, what are the top 3 things that need to get done school wise? And then daily, how can I steer my path towards achieving those 3 goals and breaking it down into smaller little goals throughout the week? How you plan, what environment you're in, what your preferences are, doesn't really matter to me. I think just looking back, what was really important and what helped me a lot in the beginning was realizing that this is no joke. It took a lot to get here, and I need to be on top of my game in terms of knowing deadlines for things, how far out to start studying for things, and just what are my biggest priorities, and then what can kind of fall to the wayside. Biggest priorities are like pass the exam, know your stuff on the exam, and then, you know, move on from there. I also think it's appropriate at this point to talk a little bit about timing. So if I had, let's just say, for example, an anatomy exam in 2 weeks, I know it's in 2 Fridays. I am not the type of person who's gonna stay up all night Wednesday, Thursday prior to and cram it in. That's not how I learn. That's probably not how most people learn for longevity anyways. So I found a good way to break up my studying night by night. And I think it's so much easier to digest when you know that you have like 1 hour that night or 2 hours that night that you need to focus on these specific anatomy things than putting it off and then stressing the hell out of yourself a couple of days before the test. I think repetition is key when it comes to classes like that. And I'm just using anatomy as the most basic example because everybody has to take it. Finding that sweet spot of how much can I actually cover in studying tonight, whether that be flashcards, taking notes from the book, reading the book, watching YouTube videos, and then how much time do I have to do something as a reward? For me, it was Vampire Diaries. I was really into it at that point. Sometimes I'd pour myself a little glass of wine if it was like the Friday after the test, and I would sit down and I would watch Vampire Diaries and drink my Merlot. Now that I'm saying this out loud, it seems like very basic advice. Like, hey guys, don't procrastinate. But I just think whatever habits that you learned in undergrad, whether that be procrastination or whether that be planning, you kind of have to look inward and figure out, like, did that work for me or not so much? Because in PT school, the stakes are just higher. I wouldn't say that the classes are necessarily much harder, but the stakes are higher. Some programs have really strict failure policies and like probation policies and stuff like that. And not to scare anybody, but you need to do well and you obviously are capable of doing well because you got in. And I tell a lot of people, I think getting in is the hardest part. If you've gotten that far, you have the tools necessary to succeed. But there's got to be a nice middle ground. You can't overdo it and be so stressed out and study 75 hours a week, and you also can't do jack shit cuz then you'll probably drop out. Now, kind of circling back to what I was talking about at the beginning, the assumption is with PT school specifically that there will just be no free time for anything ever. And I beg to differ. Now, I would say I'm a little bit more on the lenient side, a little bit more of an outlier. Like my friends kind of thought I was crazy because most weekends I was driving to Atlanta to see my friends or doing something with my family. Rarely was I staying in Dahlonega where I went to school. And I pushed the envelope a little bit. I remember one time I missed a class, just a class. Okay, guys, don't come for me. It was just no quiz, no test. My little sister had moved out to Breckenridge for ski season, and I was like, obviously, I need to go snowboard. And so I did just that. I took Thursday, Friday, Saturday, came back Sunday, and it was epic. No regrets. However, I did have a little talking to, a little shame, little spanking, little verbal spanking from my professor. She was like, you can't just go out of town. And I was like, touche. So sorry about that. But man, I was carving up that mountain. Anyway, there is a time for free time and there is a time for study. And prioritizing, just like you're going to prioritize the things in school that you think are most important, prioritizing that time to give your mind a break and to have fun and to smile and to laugh, so important. I'll tell you what I did. After every exam, I would put my headphones in and go for a run. And now I know that's gonna sound crazy for some people, like, okay, ew, disgusting. I'm not a runner. That doesn't sound fun. But that wasn't even like work-life balance. That was just pure stress management because the aura of the building after a test, a really difficult test has been taken, is pretty darn negative. Everybody is standing around whispering, like, what did you put for this? Like, what do you think? It's not fun. And you don't want to be around it. And it's not going to change whatever you put down, whether that's A, B, C, or D on that multiple choice exam. So don't ruminate. Go do something fun. So I would either go for a run, put my headphones in, jam out, or I'd get in my car and I would drive up the mountain and like take a beautiful hike because I was in the North Georgia mountains. That immediate release following a very stressful hour or two saved me some days. I didn't sit around and overthink every possible thing that I could have gotten wrong. And I never I never did poorly on exams. Like I think I don't think that has anything to do specifically with the running afterwards, but it didn't change anything. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But back to the work-life balance specifically. I think my friends and I did a good job celebrating the wins and also like grinding when it was time to grind. There was a little Mexican restaurant in town that we would go to after a big test or after a big milestone, end of a semester. The whole cohort would try and get like one big long table at, oh God, what was the restaurant called? Some basic name like tamales or tostados or I don't remember. But we laughed together and had fun together and just endured the misery together. I think if you're decent at planning out your studying and knocking your stuff out, you can absolutely enjoy a Saturday free of school. or a Sunday free of school. My family was only an hour away, so a lot of times I'd go home and enjoy a Sunday family dinner and then drive back home that night. And I wasn't stressed about it. I knew what the following week had in store for me because I was writing it down in my planner, you guys. And because of that, I felt very fulfilled. I felt like I was doing my due diligence at school, but I also felt like I was able to maintain my friendships in Atlanta, relationships with whoever I was dating at the time. It was just, it was a nice balance that I found for myself. I touched on friends earlier, but I think that this is worth its own little excerpt here. Forming friendships in the classroom is just helpful. It's just nice. I think my first semester, it's kind of like a feeler. You're feeling out, do we vibe? Do we not vibe? A lot of us have very similar interests, but not all 32 people are going to get along perfectly. But by the end of physical therapy school, I had such solid friendships. I mean, some of those girls were in my wedding, and it makes it that much more fun. And it almost infuses every single day with a little bit of that like work life balance that you so desperately are looking for. If you go at it alone and you're a loner, and that's fine if that's you and you're not really interested in talking to other people, but I think it's human nature to seek out that connection, and you find yourself laughing in the hallway and you're kind of talking about stuff in class and in between things that are happening that day. And you're coordinating, like, what are we wearing on this day? And what about the white coat ceremony? And who all wants to go get a drink after this? It's just so much more fun. So if you're more on the shy end, there's probably still, no. Even though the cohorts tend to be pretty small, I think there is always a friend there for somebody else, no matter what kind of personality you have. I saw it all over in our class, friendships being made, and it's just the camaraderie, man. It's cool. It's different than undergrad. Like, you really are going through stuff together. You're cutting open bodies together. It's just different, but it's lovely and definitely necessary if you are not trying to survive PT school, but thrive in PT school. Let's talk about the Jane app for a second. If you haven't heard by now, Jane is my clinical management software that I use to manage everything in my day to day life that happens inside the clinic and honestly outside the clinic too. Whether it's patient documentation, AI scribe helping me with patient documentation, scheduling patients online, running reports, creating my online booking link, and even sending automatic texts to patients to remind them of their visits, Jane is literally my go to. You can get a 1 month grace period with my code PT Roni 1MO. That's capital PTRONI, number one, capital M, capital O. This is actually making me think back on study tactics a second. My friend group, they often would study together, and I actually would exclude myself from that a lot of the times. I am just not a group study girl, and I think having the self-awareness to know what is gonna help me succeed and then what is just gonna be fun. Like, I think I would have had a lot more probably fun studying with my friends, but I am a little bit of a lone wolf when it comes to really grinding and prepping and putting my boots in the ground getting ready for an exam. I remember we had this kinesiology class that everybody hated, but I kinda liked secretly, and I never studied with anybody for it. I would get my laptop out. I had this Lenovo that was like a touch screen, and I would go onto the treadmill at the school gym and flip the screen around so I could like toggle through it almost like an iPad. And I read the entire textbook from front to back. And when it came time to take that exam, I got like 104. I'll never forget that. I was like, how is that possible? Was there an extra credit question? But that's not me bragging. It's just saying, like, I had to isolate myself a little bit when it came time to really, really work. If it was a review thing or if it was like flashcards, yeah, I could hang out with the girls, but a lot of the times I needed to be alone. So I encourage you to look inward, figure out what helps you best. Is it learning from other people and reviewing things with other people? Or is it being alone at the library and figuring stuff out for yourself and then maybe reaching out to your peers if there's something that's not making sense? There was one friend that I spent the night at her house a lot. Shout out Kelsey if you're listening to this. And her and I could kind of go at it back and forth together. And that was kind of my cap. Like one other person I could study with. And her and I were frequently on the same page about things like, okay, wait, we need to practice this because we don't get it. And no, we definitely have this subject covered. So, long story short, overarching concept here is you have to figure out what works for you and ideally very soon. You don't want to spend 2.5 years in PT school figuring that out because when it comes time to take the boards, you need to be a pro at figuring out how to study. And speaking of the boards, I do have an episode on that. So if you guys want to go back and listen, it's called, I think, Passing the Boards Exam. This one little tidbit just came to me. As I'm sitting here reflecting on my PT school experience, it was cute. It was it was tough at times, guys, because it was in the middle of COVID. Uh, but during all of that, I maintained pretty good relationships with my professors. And you're not going to be hum ho happy with everybody, but there are probably 3 or 4 professors that I could still reach out to today via text, via email, and just ask them questions or catch up. And it helps form a sense of security in your school. Like, I just remember going to I guess my academic advisor, she was also our pediatric PT professor. And her and I would just have great conversations. Yes, about school, but also about life. And it builds a sense of community in the program where you're like, okay, these professors actually do have my back. And not all of them are created equal, but the ones that I really vibed with, I really vibed with. You can learn a lot from them, and they often give off this sense of like, it's not that deep. Don't worry too much. We all have been there. We're all physical therapists now, and you're going to be okay. And having an adult, I mean, we're all adults, but having an older adult in a position that you respect and admire is kind of nice. You know, you feel taken care of and it makes you feel like it's possible. I'm also going to do a more so Ronnie specific thing that I think helped, but I think it will resonate with other people. Please, please, please stay active. I think physical therapy school can introduce some bad habits, whether that's bad eating habits, a sedentary lifestyle. I don't know. I don't have good examples, but I stayed active and prioritized my fitness throughout. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it was more of a stress relief tactic than anything else. It's not like I was working towards a certain goal weight or a certain physique. I was just like, I have to go to the gym and de-stress this way. And so I'm a big fan of it. I also think like as a physical therapist, you should be pretty physical. You should know what you're doing in the gym or on a run because you might be treating those patients in the future. But I think it saved me. Like I don't know what I would do if I was sitting around on my ass and then also enduring the stress of school. That's a tough thing to do. It is just nature's most efficient and best way to stress relief. So do it. Make sure you get that heart rate up and you will thank yourself. In closing, I want to quote one of my old bosses. He was a clinic director when I was working my in-between job before PT school. And I was expressing some nervousness towards getting in. And then once I'm in, what am I going to do? And he was like, Ronnie, you can do anything for 3 years. So think about that. Everything is temporary. The days will go by slowly, but the years are pretty short. All of a sudden you'll be a second year and you'll be like, oh my God, how did we get here? And then the next time you look, you're sitting at graduation with all your friends and you're like throwing your hat up in the air. It goes by quickly. And if you've gotten into PT school, you absolutely have what it takes to succeed in PT school. So, with the knowledge that life is short and anything can be accomplished in 3 years, or you can endure anything for 3 years, Try your best to enjoy it. That's what I tell any PT student I meet now. I'm like, look, this is your last time that you will be surrounded by people your age, excited about learning the field that you are also excited about learning, passionate about a lot of the same things you're passionate about. No, you're not making any money. Yes, you might be taking out loans, but you are solely responsible for making it through school, and that's it. And for the rest of your life, you're going to be working. Work will always be there. The future will always be there. We hope. But just zoom out a second. Take a moment to reflect on the fact that this is where you are. You did it. Like, you got into PT school. That's so cool. And it's going to be okay. You're going to graduate and you're going to miss it a little bit when it's over. In retrospect, I'm proud of the way that I handled myself and my schooling and my studies while I was in physical therapy school. I think I did a pretty good job. Maybe made a mistake here and there with like traveling when I shouldn't have been traveling. But overall, it was a positive experience. That's actually fun fact. I met my husband while I was in physical therapy school. He's not a physical therapist, but I had the time and the freedom to literally talk to boys. So it's going to be okay. I think that if you have other questions or you want to hear more of content like this, send me a DM, reach out to me, let me know. As always, thank you for listening. Hit me up with one of those 5-star reviews, comment, subscribe, heart, reshare, whatever it is that you do. And I'll talk to you guys next week.